Greetings and salutations, my friends. I am, of course, Charles Q. Banks, and I'd like to welcome you to my third video in the Godzilla Reviews series I'm doing. And today we are going to be delving into the most recent Godzilla movie, and the first Toho Studios Japanese Godzilla film in over 20 years, SHIN Godzilla. Now, if you look on the IMDb synopsis on the internet, you will find probably the shortest synopsis I have ever read. And it goes like this. Japan is plunged into chaos upon the appearance of a giant monster. That's it, folks. That's all you'll find on the Internet Movie Database. Not much data to be had there. But the Google synopsis has a bit more, thankfully. Sit back and relax as I read it to you. It's a peaceful day in Japan when a strange fountain of water erupts in the bay, causing panic to spread among government officials. At first they suspect only volcanic activity, but one young executive dares to wonder if it may be something different, something alive. His worst nightmare comes to life when a massive guild monster emerges from the deep and begins tearing through the city, leaving nothing but destruction in its wake. As the government scrambles to save the citizens, a ragtag team of volunteers cuts through a web of red tape to uncover the monster's weakness and its mysterious ties to a foreign superpower. But time is not on their side. The greatest catastrophe to ever befall the world is about to evolve right before their eyes. And that's very melodramatic, and it really fits Godzilla, I think, being melodramatic. And it's actually very specific to the plot of this movie. This is much more a mystery than a disaster film, and it even is more of a political commentary than almost anything else. The last movie I reviewed in my Godzilla series was the 2014 Gareth Edwards version of Godzilla, which basically followed all of the tropes of a modern disaster flick. Really bad character relationships and writing mixed with amazing visuals and effects and lighting and all of that. Basically having zero impact other than its action sequences. But this one takes a very different approach. And even though it really focuses on Godzilla as the monster and as the threat, it really has a lot more to it under the surface. This was written and directed both by Hideaki Anno and Shinji Higuchi, which both created the amazing, immensely popular anime series and series of movies under the title of Neon Genesis Evangelion. And those movies and those stories are anything but tropic. There is so much under the surface to explore, so much metaphorical symbolism to be uncovered. And like I said, it's the same with this movie. When I heard that they were working on this movie, I was like, sign me up, I'm gonna see that movie no matter what. Because they mainly have worked on anime, and specifically Evangelion, which I have seen and am kind of a fan of. I love anime. I have a whole, shelf of anime to my right, and I loved that anime series. It's really inspirational to films such as Pacific Rim, which in America it's one of the first of its kind, but across the seas it's like, that's boring, that's been done so many times in Japan and in anime, and they really take anime seriously. So when they were working on this movie, they took a lot of those same steps to make this a more deep, psychological and, intellectual film than I think Western audiences will be used to. And there are a lot of things that Western audiences will not be used to. There is a whole lot of dialogue, and if you're watching in English, it's going to be subbed. There is no dub, which I'm kind of grateful for, because I've seen some horrible dubs of Godzilla movies, and it's better to watch them all in sub. So That's my idea of a Godzilla movie, is watching something and reading a lot of subtitles. And not only are there subtitles in English, there are subtitles of the names of every character that comes on screen, which will put some people off because it sometimes just fills the screen almost, like 25% or more of the screen will fill with this white flared kanji, which is then interpreted in yellow text, which is very kind of distracting, but if you watch anime, you watch subbed movies, this won't be anything new. And with over 20 people in its cast, there's not a lot of character development. This is not about human emotion. This is not about human relationships or human drama. This is mainly a political film about what happens when the government cannot, because the government is so lazy with its bureaucracy, it cannot deal with massive threats like Godzilla. And so that's the interesting thing about it. There's a lot of satire on the current state of Japanese government, which is very interesting, and there's actually a lot of humor under the surface of this film, which is kind of unexpected because this film really is extremely serious. More serious than, of course, the 1998 version. That was almost a comedy film, in my view. It was just kind of fun romp, like this will be a perfect ride in Universal Studios once it gets to the theaters. This one, not so much. It's a lot more heady. There's a ton of dialogue, like I already said. A lot of it is political and scientific, and a lot of the scientific jargon that they use will go straight over your head. It doesn't matter if you're a scientist. A lot of this stuff is basically bogus, and you might have a problem with that. I didn't. Every Godzilla movie has a lot of bogus science that they're going to throw at you to try and make sense of Godzilla being Godzilla. The last film, however, Gareth Edwards' film, never even attempted to show us what Godzilla was or his origin story. What is this thing? It told us the origin story of the Mutos. They're these ancient, like, dinosaur creatures that lived before the dinosaurs, when Earth was incredibly radiated for some reason, and they fed off of radiation, and then there was a depletion of radiation so that humans could come into the mix, and then when humans created atomic bombs, then the Mutos could come in. But Godzilla is just treated as this ancient creature that's just there, and for some reason he's fighting for the good of mankind. In this film, it really doesn't tell you from the beginning where he came from. It's a mystery. The point is to figure out what Godzilla is and how to stop him, because like it says in the synopsis on Google, he is an evolving creature. He may be natural, he may not be natural, and you find that out through the course of the movie. And the actual reveal of what he is so subtle, you can definitely miss it. The ending has an amazing shot that, while it does reveal something about Godzilla, it also raises way more questions and leaves it open for a sequel, which I am very excited for if they do make it. I would go to see that movie immediately, because I really enjoyed this film, despite all of the serious social commentary, which some may find boring if they're wanting to something more like Gareth Edwards' version. But I found it extremely stimulating, intellectually speaking, because they didn't treat the audience like an idiot. They treated the audience like someone who can stand up to a huge barrage of governmental jargon and come through it on the other side the wiser and even smarter than a lot of the governmental figures. That being said, there are a few issues with this film that are, I think, are real issues and not just, you may like this if you are used to anime or subbed movies, and you may dislike it if you're American. These are issues that could have been better. The CGI is amazing, but at the end, the CGI, for some reason, kind of goes off the rails a little bit, and you can see a lot of the tears and the textures that are actually really fake when it gets right up to Godzilla. And from on my right here, the model of Godzilla is beautiful. There is so much detail, even more than in the Gareth Edwards version, and they made use of these effects to the fullest. And there is so much more Godzilla in this film than in that film, and so much more destruction. It actually used a lot of the music from the earlier Godzilla films, and a lot of the design choices are from the earlier Godzilla designs. So he has those massive thighs and those tiny arms, and it almost looks like a guy in a suit, but it isn't, you know. And his tail is massive, larger than even Godzilla is, longer, I mean. And again, he has flame breath, but there's also a lot more lasers shooting out of Godzilla this time than ever before. He's much more destructive, and he's a learning threat that the government has to figure out how to defeat. Anyway, all of that is very positive. What I was trying to get to were the negatives. And that's hard this time. So what were the negatives? Yeah, let me think. Oh yeah, the way that they finally defeat Godzilla is a little hokey. All of the difficult things that I came across that kind of limited my enjoyment of it were from the ending. How they defeated him, how they got the trucks to be loaded onto with this strange freezing creation amalgamation, and then shot it into Godzilla's mouth was pretty hokey, but it was pretty awesome at the same time. Like, this is the only time in this film that it felt like, oh, this is kind of hilarious because it's so unrealistic. You know, a whole military army, both from America and Japan, cannot deal with Godzilla, but a bunch of trucks with antifreeze, or no, not antifreeze, with freezing liquid can defeat him. And so that's how it happens. And there's so much more to it that that's not even a spoiler. Believe you me. So yeah, what else is there to say? At the beginning, when Godzilla first comes onto shore, he has these gills, and you may have remembered that from the synopsis. And gills? Godzilla has gills, you ask? Yes, he had gills. Had, emphasis on had, because as it says, he's an evolving creature. And if the internet, if Google is willing to give off that much information, I don't mind saying this next part, which is he comes on shore like a big, tan, kind of brown, sludgy fish lizard with gills, and he's bleeding, and he has these giant googly eyeballs, and my friend and I, who went to see the film, were kind of taken aback by that at first, and I was ready to hate the film, because I thought, this is Godzilla? How is that Godzilla? And it was just so funny. I had to laugh out loud at the design of this creature, who's, you know, squiggling around, destroying buildings with his, you know, rather clumsy gait. And I was like, oh boy, if this is the redesign of Godzilla, then this is going to be a horrible movie. But that isn't his final form. He has multiple forms, and that's the way that he combats the government. The government comes at him with different attacks, and he basically takes in all of the different attacks and changes based on his environment. And that's very interesting. And so when you see that silly googly-eyed fish creature, do not be disheartened. It gets better. So yeah, some people may not like the fact that there isn't human emotion or drama to this. There's no romance. There are female characters, but they don't have to get together with the main character, which is a great choice. It would have slowed the movie down to have actual human relationships being played out and human drama between, you know, characters. Like, you know, a love triangle sometimes happens in these movies, in these disaster flicks, and it doesn't happen, and this movie is all the better for it because it's focused laser sharp on the threat of Godzilla, which is the best thing about this movie and should be the best thing about any Godzilla movie. And another thing, he wasn't in the shadows the whole time. Most of the shots are of Godzilla when it's during the day, and those shots are actually realistic, and they make you think, wow, that creature is really there, and he's at least 350 feet tall, if not more. This is the most massive Godzilla I've ever seen on screen, and it is so impressive. So, I know that a lot of people don't like this film as much as I do. And I kind of understand that, because it's not a movie that Western audiences are used to. They're used to the dumb, mindless action thrillers that end up being more like, catastrophe movies with the apocalypse coming, or, waves crashing over everything, than a real monster movie. And this is a real monster movie. Japan finally has Godzilla back in its hands to do with what it wants, and it's so much better. This is the best Godzilla movie that we have gotten in 20 years. I like this movie a lot better than Gareth Edwards' version, and I gave that a 6. This I give probably an 8 based on my own personal enjoyment of the movie. I came out of that movie smiling, wanting to tell my friends and family about it, because it caters to everything that I like about these sorts of movies. And so, yeah, so others will like it less. Most people will probably give it a 7 at most. On IMDb, they gave it I think what is it? Let me just look for a moment. A 6.7, which is a little low in my opinion. 6.4 I've seen, but yet again, the people have said otherwise. On Google, it says 89% of people liked this movie. If you either like it or hate it, most people liked it. And that is really what you gotta come away with, is that this movie is really enjoyable if you're looking at it from the monster movie perspective and not from the action thriller catastrophe movie that people enjoyed from Gareth Edwards' version. So yeah, I give it an 8. Most people will probably give it a 7, but I think this film deserves to be at the top of the recent Godzilla movies, and is the king of the monster movies that I've reviewed. So, that's it for now. I'd like to thank you all for watching. Thank you for your subscription. I'll put the link to my Facebook and Twitter in the description. And if you want to give to me on Patreon, please consider going to that. Please subscribe and like and all that stuff so I can make more of these if you like them. So, thanks again. God bless. See you in the next one.